exactly is financial literacy? What what are the problems faced by the youth, and why is it so important to address it?
Thanks, Giselle, for giving me the opportunity to speak. To start off with, I would say that it's very essential. A problem that we are facing today in the country is that we are not being taught financial literacy in schools. So it's extremely important for us to learn this at a very young age, because what happens over here is that we have time. Okay, so at our age, instead, if I look at history, if I look at the past trends, what has been noticed is that the younger you invest, the larger is your probability of making money, or rather your investments paying off. So what happens is, if we are not taught at a young age how to invest our money and what financial literacy is all about, then it's going to be a big problem for us, because we are going to miss out on the time factor, which is extremely important for us to attain the best results. Now, another thing that we have to understand what is happening in today's world. So in today's world, we have social media. Social media is influencing an entire global population. So everything today is influenced by social media, to the extent that we're no longer influenced by our friends or by our peers or by the people around us. The social interaction factor has reduced. Rather, we are more influenced by the things we follow on Instagram or on Twitter or Facebook or whatever it may be. So what happens today is that if you open Instagram today, and if you want to understand what are the financial aspects or anything with regard to finance, what social media portrays to you is that you have this influencer culture, which is promoting a lavish lifestyle, promoting spending a lot of money, having a lot of money, being rich. Now, don't get me wrong, my point is that wealth is not defined by the car you drive, by the house you live in. It's rather in the assets that you own. And when you look at all of these lavish lifestyles, when they promote a luxury car or any other luxury factor over here, what happens is that you're promoting depreciation. In other words, you're not promoting assets, you're promoting liabilities. So when you look at the collapse of many individuals, many businesses today, what is happening is that you have a lot of mismanagement of asset and liabilities. So to be brief and to explain to you what is an asset and a liability. An asset is something that puts money in your pocket. A liability is something that takes money out of your pocket. So when you accumulate things like cars, or you accumulate a phone, or you accumulate, even a house that you live in yourself is not an asset. But a house that you give out on rent, that is an asset, because that is making money for you. So it's very important to understand these things. A book that I recommend, to the youth today is Rich Dad Poor Dad, because it explains to you how you should manage your asset and liability factor over here. So my point being at the end of this is that given the social media aspect of it, we need to understand as a generation that if we want to get the maximum benefit out of something, we have to sacrifice at this age. Now, don't get me wrong. My point is not that we should only be sacrificing and not enjoying ourselves. It's very important to enjoy ourselves. But what happens over here is that we have to understand that we are young, we are proactive, we have a lot of energy, and we have the flexibility, because we have the time to recover if we make a mistake. So it's very, very important for us as a generation at this age to make sacrifices at this age in order to enjoy the fruit later on. So a very lovely quote that I keep pondering upon and I love is the quote that goes as follows. It is a man is enjoying the shade of a tree today that was planted by someone else years ago. So it's very important to understand this aspect of it. Now, if I speak about what is it that we as a generation today need, we as a generation today and the generations in the past have always desired freedom. So freedom is extremely, or rather, to put it in a better way, freedom is the ultimate goal of every individual. And what happens today is, in our nation, people are forced into occupations and professions that they are not very fond of. As a result of that, they sort of fall in this rat race and this trap. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the only thing that people think about is what can I do to get out of this trap? And that is what we define freedom in this regard. So what's important for us to, to understand over here is that in order to attain freedom, okay, what is the main, what is the freedom that we're looking for? We're looking for financial freedom, because that gives us the ability to practice our hobbies, to do all of the things that we love, be it traveling or playing instruments the entire day, whatever it may be. At the end of the day, the concern is, do we have enough to look after a family? Do we have enough to run a household? And that is what financial freedom will get you. And that ultimately lies on how you manage your assets and your liabilities. If you mismanage your assets and liabilities, then that's going to put you in a further trap at the end of it. So, I would just like to conclude with a beautiful story that always I love to think about this story. Let me recite it to you. So there were what do you say? Yeah. So many years ago, there was this American man who was driving back from work, and what happened over there was, he on the way he decided that he was going to sell a holding. Okay, so a stock in his portfolio he wanted to sell, which he had termed as a long term buy. So he wanted to sell that stock and book profits on it. But what happened is, on the way he met with an accident, and as a result of that, he fell into coma for a period of 10 to 15 years or so. By the time he was out of that coma, okay, when he recovered, his holding went from a value of $10,000 that he wanted to book to $200 million. So you can imagine the potential that this holds. Now you may ask me, what is the downside? There has to be a downside, and I agree there is a downside. The downside is that your assets do not only appreciate; it could also fall, and you could also lose money. But the point that I'm trying to make is financial literacy. Financial literacy is not only about managing assets and liabilities, or knowing how money works, but rather it's in knowing how to invest your money, where to invest your money, and at what price to buy your asset. So this is very important to understand. Thank you.
So, Johan, if I would ask you, what is your advice to the youth?
Okay, my advice to the youth would be, enjoy yourself. Okay, you have plenty of time, you have plenty of energy. Enjoy yourself, but make sure that you live a life of balance. So today, what happens is, in our generation, we are living, we're living on extremes. We're living, either we're too hell bent on working and stuff, or we are on the other side of the spectrum, that is just enjoying ourselves and not caring about what tomorrow has in store. So what my advice to the people of my age and the people around me would be: live a life of balance, have fun, sacrifice, and hope. Keep hoping for a better future, because it's out there. It just takes time. Be patient. Thank you.
Thank you, Johan. Next up is panelist Neil D'Souza. Neil is currently pursuing his BBA at Depos. He loves learning and discovering new things. So, Neil, what are the benefits of being financially literate? And in your opinion, what are the pillars of financial literacy?
Yeah, first I would like to go upon the pillars of financial literacy. First one being budgeting. By far, it is one of the most underrated and yet most effective technique to the financial plan is a budget. You need, and I stress upon that you actually need to know where your money is going upon. Most of us have no idea, literally no idea where our spending habits are. We have come across many common phrases like "paisa kabhi haath mein nahi rukta," and I have also come across people saying, young people especially, saying that "paisa to haath ka mehal hai," which is absolutely crazy. In order to achieve financial freedom, you strictly need to spend according to your budget. Next is savings. Oh yeah, I have to say Indians are pretty good at savings compared to the rest of the world. I think savings is way more effective when you have a budget on your hand. But nonetheless, I won't bore you all with savings. You all pretty well know what savings are and how they're important, thanks to our extremely saving conscious Indian culture. For instance, the ongoing pandemic has really shown how important savings can be. Next, investing. And here it comes. Indians are not very well known for investing capabilities. Just savings are not enough. For a fact, savings without growing is actually not advisable at all, because your hard earned money is eventually going to be eaten up by inflation. Inflation is the imposter. It can take value of your money without you knowing it. In Hindi, it is called महंगाई कभी बढ़ती रहती है. The following are some of the well-versed things and words most of the youths and somewhat of them most of them you already know, but I would like to go upon hedge funds. Hedge funds are typically pooled up money from high net worth individuals. These funds are operated by well-known investors and take position in markets according to their research, and only the richest of the richest are allowed in this. So Michael Jackson, Kim Basinger, and Mike Tyson, what is common in them? They are incredibly great at what they have done and they are really good, but it's not that good when it comes to finances. In fact, Michael Jackson had about a $500 million of debts due to his exorbitant spendings. You can have the best of the paying jobs in the world and still be broke. Just because you make money doesn't mean you're better at managing it. And here are the top 5 reasons how deep understanding of your finances can help you. Better decision making. When you have a financial plan, you're in the driver's seat of life. No more need of worry about uncertainties. The car purchase, the destination wedding plans, you can all curate them in your plan to the best of your needs. Better debt management. Debt can be dangerous and really dangerous when you're not aware about them. Having a proper financial plan keeps a check on the overheads and especially helps you systematically get rid of it. The cost control. If you follow a plan, you won't spend unnecessarily. And by far, the best technique to do this is having a diary or also upcoming apps budgeting, which help you all dump your expenses and analyze them periodically and have a better understanding of your expenses and your cost. Accurate tax compliance. Financial planning involves estimating your taxes and adjusting your estimates as a rise and fall in your sales in terms of business. Failure to pay income, property, pay tax rolls can be seriously problems, including penalties for their business. And lastly, financial resources. When measurable financial goal determined, better financial understanding can achieve and impact the decision does and the results in review. The next slide is financial literacy across the world. Not surprised by the fact that India is sitting below everyone else, but there are some communities in India who can manage well their money. Like for instance, I can give an example of Marwaris. They know how to do it. Why? So the question is why? I think early age conditioning, training both at home and grassroots levels can go a long way. Thank you.
Okay, so Neil, what would your advice be?
Okay, my advice. So the most important thing in my opinion, is putting the efforts to learn, because in India we think that we know everything and we'll do however it goes, dekha jayega, but it's not like that. You have to put efforts to analyze and put down expenses. Like I said previously, we have to do budgets and know where expenses are going on. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. So our final panelist for the evening is Brian Eremita. Brian possesses a bachelor's in technology in mechanical engineering and is currently working as a business intelligence analyst. He is super passionate about jazz and Latin American music. So, Brian, my question to you is, what are the different sources of investment available, and how can an individual effectively diversify their portfolio?
Firstly, I would like to touch on the topic of financial issues faced by the current generation or the latest additions to the workforce, that is the youth. So, as we all know, a lot of today's youth have taken educational loans to fund their degrees. The problem with that is, after the pandemic hit, unemployment rates are the highest they've been in the past 45 years in India, and a lot of these students aren't able to pay back these loans. The situation has become so bad that most of the banks have reduced their exposures to these loans. That is, they do not lend to these. They do not lend for student loans anymore. The next issue they face is they have bad money habits. And by that I mean, as my friend Neil said, uh, when you just start working, you have that newly acquired monetary freedom, and you would like to spend as much as you can. So then start the parties, the expensive watches, that latest bike, the iPhones, gaming PCs, whatever you have it. Another issue they have is rising costs. Now, if any of you have been to metro cities, you would have realized how high the living costs are, especially rent and utilities, compared to Goa or other villages. And the problem with that is the living costs have risen significantly, but the wages have not increased in a proportionate manner. And we do not realize this situation because we are living as of now at our parents' expense in most cases. Another issue is we have poor investment guidance. So as my fellow panelist Neil said, Indians are great at saving, but when it comes to investing, we are pretty down that ladder. We get advice like keep saving money, do not spend it, or at the very best you put it in FDs or postal deposits. The problem with that is it's all good, but your interest on FDs and postal deposits is not even half as compared to equities and basically the stock market. Now I would like to touch on various instruments one can use to invest. So most of you must have heard about mutual funds. So basically, mutual funds are just gathering a pool of money which is invested into companies belonging to different sectors of the economy, be it manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, IT, etc. When it comes to mutual funds, I would advise you to please track the past performance of these mutual funds. That is, the interest they have, the performance and the interest they have garnered over the past few years. And please make sure that it is well diversified. I will speak on diversified a bit later. Another instrument is insurance, life and health insurance. It is mandatory. We do not know what tomorrow holds, so please invest in your future into insurance. Another one is direct equity. This is where you directly purchase a stock of a particular company. Now, I would not advise this to most of you, as most of you would not know how to analyze a company or the industry that the company operates in. So this has inherent risk in it. Now, I would like to touch on the topic of diversification. So diversification basically means you split up your capital that you have to invest into different sectors of or different asset classes. By asset classes, I mean equities, bonds, fixed deposits, bullion, and by bullion, I mean gold and silver. For example, if I have 1 lakh rupees to invest today, I will not put it all into stock of say TCS or Infosys. A sensible investor would split it among different asset classes. For example, I would put 50,000 into equities, 50,000 into bonds and bullion. Now, among equities, you have to diversify further. Equities, as I mentioned earlier, is basically stock of a company. So when you invest in equities, please make sure that you diversify, that you split your invested capital into different industries. So invest some of it into pharmaceuticals, some into IT, some into automotive, some into manufacturing, but please do not pool it into a single sector. Also, when you invest through mutual fund, make sure that the fund is well diversified. Lastly, I would like to conclude by saying, now that you're just getting into the workforce, you don't have any dependents. So please try to invest as much as you can to build your financial future and a strong foundation for your future. Thank you.
Brian, what would your advice to the youth be?
My advice for the youth would be, as I just said, please try to put in at least 25 to 30% of your monthly income into any investment class you're comfortable with investing in, be it FDs or mutual fund, but please try to invest at least 30%, because you do not have any major expenses at this age, but they will come up as you grow older. So this is the best time to build a strong foundation for your financial freedom in your future. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. For anyone who's got questions, we start the Q&A round now. So please type in your questions in the chat box. Okay, so the question is, what would be the allocation in percentage from your monthly salary for investing, in your opinion? This is to Brian.
So I would put in, as I said, 25 to 30% of my monthly salary. But if it's a substantial salary, you can even go up to 50%. I have friends who do that currently. They put in at least 50% of their income into a mutual fund or a debt fund. Thank you.
I could add to that actually. You know what? To address that question, it's very important to also understand your age, because what happens is, if you're at a younger age, that means you can also take on higher risk in your portfolio. Whereas if once you're reaching the end of your once you're reaching an older age, you won't be able to take as much risk. You'll need more liquidity. So it's very important to take your age into consideration. And also, it's very, a suggestion to the people is that sit down and compute what are the monthly expenses that you're incurring, because sometimes you'd find certain expenses that you can avoid. So if you can avoid that, then that say for example, if you're saving, probably if you're spending 5,000 on some subscription of something you're not even watching or reading, you could save that money, and that money could then go towards an investment. So I would recommend sitting down and evaluating where your expenses are going, and if you can avoid any, then avoid that, and allocate those funds towards an investment. Yeah.
Okay. So the next question to Brian is, since you spoke on diversifying and investing, what is the ideal ratio?
So there is a generalized equation once. What you do is, from 100 you subtract your current age, and that percentage should be invested into equities. The rest should be ideally invested into fixed income. And by fixed income, I mean fixed deposits, like your bank deposits or postal, or your government bonds. Government bonds give you a percentage every year based on the amount you paid to buy it, your principal. For example, if I'm currently, say, 24 years old, so 76% of my income will be invested into equities, and the remaining 24 would be invested into fixed income, that is FDs and postal. So that is my 2 cents on it.
I think I would like to add to that. What Brian said was, according to your age, you can allocate the diversification. So if you're young, you can go for more equities because you have a longer runway and you can take more risk. But as you grow older, you reduce the equity and go on more on debt.
Okay, so the next question is for Neil. Isn't it good to have a small percentage of your income in postal FD because of lower risk?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. But in India, I think everything is in FD. Like, India has the highest savings rate all over the world. That's wrong. Because as I said previously, just savings and FDs actually eat your money due to inflation. So in India, the inflation rate is about 6 to 7%, and the current FD rate is about 5%. So every year you're losing 2% of your money due to inflation, and we don't even know that. So it's important to also invest in higher return avenues.
I would like to further add to that. Most people don't know this, but the capital gains on your FD, that is the interest that you make on your FD, is taxable according to your current income tax bracket. So your effective interest rate is far lower than you think it is.
Also, another interesting thing to understand here is that you also have many stocks. You have many stocks that provide very good dividend, which is sometimes much more than your FTs. So though it carries a higher risk, you have see when we take on higher risk, right? We need to be compensated for taking on higher risk. So now, if I were to justify my statement, what I would say is that though you're taking higher risk in by investing in a in a particular share with high dividend, you're also getting the benefit of of capital appreciation on that particular security. So it's also very important to understand that, leaving that aside, you also have other securities like bonds and debentures, which you can also invest in, which sometimes have a lot of benefits that come along with it. So I would also recommend looking into that.
So the next question is it better to buy A grade shares or lower shares?
My A grade shares are lower. So my advice would be is to understand where the market trends lie. Because what happens is, when you're in a see, at the end of the day, you need to understand what is your risk to reward ratio. If your risk, for every, let me put it this way, for every risk that you take, for every 1 rupee of risk, there should be 3 rupees of reward. So in periods where the market rallies to phenomenal rates or highs, what would happen is this equation would then tilt against your favor, because your risk would be 3 and your reward would be 1. So in those situations, what would ideally be the thing to do is to exit that and to hold on to cash. And of course, when the market does correct, then you can allocate the funds back into the market. So that would be my response to that question.
Okay, so the next question is, since millennials draw big salaries, don't you think you should consider tax planning? Also, is a term plan good at a young age as premiums are low and cover is high?
Uh, about the about term plans, I feel you only take life insurance as a hedge to hedge your risk that your family faces once you pass. The thing is, always buy life insurance as a guarantee that your family can afford the same standard of living that you currently have even after you die. So always, so I would recommend a term plan, but then that's entirely up to your risk profile and your returns profile.
Also, I would like to that in India, for more instance, like insurance has been taken as an investment, which is wrong. I think, as Brian said, investment should be taken as a hedge against your health and not as an investment.
To add to that, in a brief, is that tax planning. I agree with that point. Tax planning is also essential for us at a young age, and I think income tax is one of the most interesting subjects that I ever studied in school. In high secondary, college, whatever. Because what happens is, you understand where how you can plan your portfolio in a way that you can save out on tax, and that in turn becomes a sort of opportunity cost for you, because what is saving on your taxes, you could be then allocating somewhere else to avail of the benefit for that. So I would agree with the fact that, yes, I think at our age we need to be extremely cautious about that, and we need to spend a great deal or a great amount of time researching about income tax and its components.
Okay, so the next question is, any suggestions on whether investing in cryptocurrency is safe?
Um, honestly speaking, I would give my, I would also, in fact, recommend Neil and Brian to give their views on this. But what I would go with is, disclaimer, I'm giving my opinion on this. So what I would say is cryptocurrency. So let me explain the aspect of this. So we have stocks, we have other securities, and we have crypto. Now, why am I separating these two? The reason why I'm separating these two is because in cryptocurrency, you are buying a particular currency and you're speculating on that in the sense that you do not understand what is the fundamental or underlying value of that particular cryptocurrency. So what happens over there is that see, when we look at a stock, right? If we look at, for example, Asian Paints. Now, when we look at a stock like Asian Paints, we look at the fundamental and underlying factors of that stock. What are the financial statements like? What is their market share? What is their advantage, competitive advantage that they have? So by looking at all of these things, then by understanding what is the growth rate of that stock, right? So we can then compute that 10 years down the line, and then, of course, assuming time value of money, we can then discount that and come down to an intrinsic value. Now, what is the meaning of an intrinsic value? An intrinsic value is the real value of a security. So now, by understanding the intrinsic value, we can then determine, well, the price of a security, right? What we think is ideal, and based on that, we can then determine if it's overvalued or undervalued, right? So when it's undervalued, we then buy it. If it's overvalued, we sell it. Simple logic. And cryptocurrency, there's no way to determine the intrinsic value, because what happens is it's speculative, right? So if two of my friends come and tell me that it's a good thing, I'd go and buy it. But there's no underlying factor to help me determine what is the intrinsic value of it. So that is a large issue that we are, that I would say is with cryptocurrency. And to bring up one more short point is that the fact that companies are accepting this as a mode of payment, it's a pretty risky thing to do, because what happens is, let us assume Tesla, for example, sells a car for 100 rupees, and let us assume that 20 rupees is your profit margin. Now, if Tesla accepts a particular cryptocurrency as payment, and if that crypto drops by 20%, you have just wiped out the profit margins of your company. So that could be a great, very big issue for companies that are accepting cryptocurrency. So there needs to be a way to mitigate that risk. And at the end of the day, to conclude, I would say that cryptocurrency could be an option, but allocate a very small percentage to it, because keep in mind that it's not regulated also. So there are no people ensuring that there is no manipulation going on in that market.
Yeah, John, that was a really interesting and deep explanation of what crypto is and why it should be, how it should be handled. I have a very different view on crypto. I think in India and around the world, it's taken as an investment. Like if you invest today in crypto, it will go up. But actually, it's a currency. Treat it as a currency, not as an investment. It's a form of value. We are just buying into the thing that it will go over value, and it will go higher over the expectation of people. You're just buying into their dreams. Eventually, it will come down. But if you take the positives of crypto, there are very, very good and very helpful positives which could help individuals and the economy. It solves many problems such as easy transactions and autonomous transactions. But then we should not take it as an investment. That's my view.
The thing about crypto is the underlying technology, that is blockchain, is very interesting. It is very useful and it's up and coming. Most of these current investment banks themselves have transitioned to that for their transaction purposes. They do not use crypto, they use the underlying technology. So that is a huge plus of the cryptocurrency segment. The cryptocurrency itself is not an asset. Please don't consider it to be an asset, because it is not regulated. Whereas the stock market is regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission or Securities and Exchange Board of India, or SEBI as we call it. So cryptocurrency is not at all regulated, and most of you will know that a tweet from Elon Musk can send Bitcoin prices soaring or crash them. You also have heard of Dogecoin. What happened? In less than 2 weeks,
Brian,
it has lost more than 30%.
Sorry to interrupt, but can you please repeat what you said last again? Before Bitcoin.
So, as I was saying, cryptocurrency has its drawbacks. One of the drawbacks is it's not regulated, but one of the advantages is the underlying technology of cryptocurrency is called blockchain, and that is extremely useful for financial transactions. A transaction that would normally take around 2 days to complete on the blockchain, it takes less than 2 hours, if I'm not wrong. So, and it's very secure. It's very difficult to hack through that encryption level. So that's the only advantage I see in crypto. So please don't take it as an asset class because it is not at all regulated, and one tweet can send it soaring or crashing down. And there is no upper or lower circuit limits to limit the crash. So please consider the risks.
Okay, so our next question is, what is the current crypto situation in India?
Okay, so I know it's very difficult to stand on the bylines as everyone gets into crypto and shows fast returns, but a lot of them have not shown you that they bought at the peak. At, I think it was Bitcoin that was at $65,000, and then in a matter of 2 weeks it reached around $30,000 or $40,000. No one is going to show you that when they experienced a crash. And it's not at all regulated. The RBI, the Reserve Bank of India, which is responsible for all your current Indian rupee transactions, is against it. A lot of the world governments are against it because it is against their institutions. So until the government backs it, it is extremely dangerous to invest in it, because if one fine morning the government decides to get up and say Bitcoin is banned in India, what are you going to do with all that money that you've invested in it? So that's a huge risk. So I still don't recommend it to anyone.
Will be not taken now because we'll have another session on going in depth on this topic. Okay, so the next question is, what do our esteemed panelists think about investing in foreign stocks?
To comment on that, I think, yeah. See, let me put it in the entire, in a framework. So, firstly, to invest in a foreign stock, you have very high taxes. You have very high commissions and stuff when you're paying from when you're sending the money from India abroad. Because let me explain the reason why there are so many cuts and commissions and taxes on the way. Is because India is a developing nation, and we're a nation that wherein finance is very limited. And given a developing nation and limited finance, these things don't come hand in hand, because in a developing nation we need finance to flow in order to utilize that to develop and increase the efficiency of our country. Now, a developed nation is a capital intensive nation, because they have a lot of money, they have a lot of machinery. But but in India, what happens is we do not have a lot of money, but we may have a lot of labor. So we call India a labor intensive country. So what happens is, the reason why these taxes, cuts, commissions and stuff are high is because the government is trying to regulate and control the amount of money that is going from India abroad, because we need the money right now in India. So to invest in foreign stocks, I'll be giving my opinion here again. So what happens is, I would personally not invest in a foreign country, because India, developing nations have the most amount of scope for growth. So I wouldn't find the reason to invest in a developed country where the growths are kind of saturated already. But in India, given the amount of phenomenal opportunity that lies, I would be a heavy investor in India, because I believe in the Indian dream and the future of India. Thank you.
So our next question is, when we look at the new tax policy, capital gains have tax. What are the different ways we can minimize the amount of tax paid?
I think that there are two types of tax systems currently operating in India. The one which allows the ETC, where you can invest upon 150, like 1.5 lakh tax free and reduce your taxes. That other tax rule reduces the tax percentage, but you cannot remove amount and get it tax free. So you have to plan according to the tax rules that are present in the country. So the first one allows you to invest upon 1,50,000. So if you want to reduce your taxes, you can go there. But if you want to reduce the percentage of tax, if your income is very high, I think the second rule, which is the newer one, would be a much better option.
Okay, so what are good stocks to invest in for long term?
I think we would refrain from this question because it's against the rules of the meet.
Okay, so the final question for the evening is, what do the panelists think about investing in gold for the long term?
Okay, you want to go first?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind going first over there.
Okay.
So, with regard to gold, I think, yeah, given the nature and given the fact that given the fact that it's a commodity that is such has such a precious value with it, for the future, I think it would continue to appreciate. But a very interesting thing to understand here is that gold and the Indian market have an inverse relationship with one another. So, I'm pretty sure you're well versed with the Indian culture, right? Indians are heavy investors in gold. They'll have a lot of gold reserve. Every family has gold today. It's like that in India. So, what is important to consider here is that when the stock market or the markets, financial markets rally, people book the profits, then shift to gold. That is why if you look at past trends, you look at recent trends, you will notice there's an inverse relationship. When gold moves up, the markets move down. When the markets move up, gold moves down. So what happens here is that people switch between these two markets. So when the stock market moves up, people book their profits and will buy into gold, because gold obviously will be at a lower rate. And again, likewise, when gold moves up, people will shift to the stock market, because stock market will be low. So these are, I would say that it's very important to understand these relationships. And if you ask me, I think, yeah, gold would continue to rise, but to what extent is something that I can't really comment on. It's very hard to comment on that.
Yeah, I'll continue from there. I think gold is a thing where it does not have an underlying asset. You don't know the price, what it will be in future. You're again just buying that it will grow in future, because it does not, like a business or a stock has a business. If they increase their profits, their stock will eventually go up. But gold, we don't really know. And to add to the uncertainty of, yeah, that's what I think.
About gold, uh, as Johan said, it is a hedge against inflation. So when you have high inflationary periods, or when there's a lot of uncertainty in the economy, people tend to flock to gold, because that is historically it has always been a solid backing when during times of uncertainty. Now, apart from that, gold and silver have increasing applications in in industry too. For example, we all know the world is shifting towards renewable energy, and renewable energy requires a lot of silver and gold for quantum computing and semiconductors. There's a huge chip shortage nowadays anyways, so gold has a huge pent up demand. And apart from that, silver in solar power, you cannot do without silver, because the solar panels require silver for their electronic needs. So from that point of view, you should allocate a small portion of your portfolio to bullion, that is gold and silver, through paper instruments like ETFs or mutual funds that are backed by gold.
Okay, so now this question is to the panelists. What has been your experience during this session? Like, what's your feedback on this?
I think I'm really happy to be given the opportunity to talk to people and to answer their questions. It was really entertaining, and the panelists here are very experienced, and it was fun before the event and also even in the event.
Yeah, the questions were very, very engaging. So we all appreciate that, and look forward to doing something like this again.
I think it was it was a beautiful experience, and of course, Don Bosco Oratory has many more talks coming up for the youth. And I think ultimately it's all about the experience, how much time you spend, and thank you for this opportunity of course to Don Bosco Oratory, and thanks for all the amazing questions also that really got us panelists thinking also. And of course, if y'all want to get in touch with us, feel free to do so. We'd be happy to help you all. You can check us out on Instagram or ask for our WhatsApp numbers or whatever it may be. Thank you.
All right. So, from the Don Bosco Oratory team, the youth club, and all the members of Don Bosco Oratory Panjim, I would like to extend my thanks to Giselle Fernandez for moderating the session, and along with our panelists, Brian Ermita, Johan De Silva, and Neil, for their inputs on the session and how youth in general should invest and save up for the future. Also, a big thank you to Don Bosco Panjim for giving us the venue, the AV Hall, as most of you all might know. Joshua for the sound, Evo, and Giselle for putting everything together, and Brendan for the camera and lighting. Over to you, Giselle. Thank you very much for your questions, everyone. And stay tuned to the Don Bosco Oratory Instagram page. We have a lot more sessions coming up for you.
Okay, so to our audience, our next session will be on the 25th of July. The poster and the topic we will let you know. So do follow us on Instagram and stay tuned. Thank you.